Tangled earphones and cables. You ever notice how your earphones seem to live their own little soap opera when you're not looking? You put them in your bag neatly. Maybe you even wrap them carefully around your fingers, secure them with that tiny clip, place them gently into a pocket, and when you take them out later, they look like they've been through a hurricane, a divorce, and a midlife crisis all at once. It's almost like they're in there practicing some kind of secret knotting technique, competing for the most complicated Tangle of the Year award. And the best part, it doesn't even matter how careful you are. You could put them in a silk-lined case, inside a padded box, in a vault. Open it, and boom, instant chaos. Now, you'd think this would be one of the easiest problems in the world to fix, right? I mean, it's just a piece of wire covered in plastic. We've sent people to the moon. We've built robots that can perform surgery. But somehow, this? It's still a mystery. It's almost insulting. Here's the thing. It's not actually your fault. It's physics. There's a real, actual scientific reason your cables love becoming knots, and it's called spontaneous knotting formation. Yeah, scientists have actually studied this. A couple of physicists at UC San Diego decided to put it to the test. They tossed pieces of string into a box, shook it around, and observed what happened. Turns out, if you have something flexible and long enough, it will knot itself up naturally when it moves around in a confined space. It's not just bad luck, it's practically the law of the universe. The movement in your bag, the friction between surfaces, and the way the cable loops around itself all create what's basically a perfect storm for tangles. And here's the kicker. The longer and thinner the cable, the more likely it is to get tangled. Which explains why earphones are like the worst possible candidate for surviving a trip in your backpack. You might be thinking, okay, but can't we just design tangle-proof cables? And yeah, people have tried. You've seen those flat ribbon-like cables, or the ones coated in fabric. They do help, a little. But even those eventually twist and loop around in ways that make you question your life choices. The problem is, to truly make a cable tangle-proof, you'd have to make it either completely stiff, which would make it annoying to store and carry, or so heavy that it wouldn't move enough to knot. Neither of those is exactly practical when you just want to listen to music on the bus. And here's where it gets kind of funny. The more advanced we've gotten, the more cables we've invented. Charging cables, USB cords, HDMI cables. It's like we keep creating new opportunities for knots to happen. We solved it partially with wireless earphones, but even then, there's a charging cable for the case, so you never truly escape. The real irony is your brain plays a little trick on you when you try to untangle them. Ever notice how you pull at one part thinking it'll help, and suddenly you've made it worse? That's because the knot has a structure, even if it looks random. Tugging in the wrong spot actually tightens it. Untangling a cable is more like solving a puzzle, except it's a puzzle you never asked to play. And we've all been there. You're late, you need your earphones, you're frantically working on a knot that feels like it's mocking you, and you swear you're just gonna switch to wireless forever. But deep down, you know, one day you'll be back. Because no matter how many times we upgrade, cables are still part of our lives, and they'll still be doing their little knotting magic, waiting for the moment you let your guard down. Maybe one day someone will invent a material that naturally resists tangling, or a cable that somehow remembers staying straight. But until then, the war continues. And I don't know about you, but I think my earphones are winning.
Fitting lids on food containers. We need to talk about the most chaotic place in every single household, the container drawer. You know the one I mean. It's either a drawer, a cupboard, or maybe even an entire cabinet, and it's where all your plastic food containers and their matching lids are supposed to live. In theory, this is a perfectly organized little world. In reality, it's a lawless wasteland. Here's how it usually goes. You open the drawer to grab a container for your leftovers, and it's like a game show. You reach in, pull out a random base, then spend the next 3 minutes digging for a lid that fits. Trying on one, nope, too small. Another one, nope, doesn't snap. Third one, close, but no. And by now you got an entire pile of plastic mountain climbing out of the drawer like it's trying to escape. The funniest part, you know you had matching sets when you bought them. They came in nice little stacks, all tidy, lids on top, a symbol of culinary optimism. Fast forward 6 months, and it's a plastic dating scene where nothing is compatible anymore. How did this happen? Where do the right lids go? Is there some secret underground world where they're hiding with the missing socks from the laundry? Now, on the surface, this problem feels ridiculously easy to solve. Just make standard sizes, right? We have standard light bulb sockets, we have standard USB plugs. Why not standard food containers? Imagine walking into any store, buying a random lid, and knowing it will fit your container at home. But here's where reality steps in and laughs in our faces. First of all, there is no global standard for containers because they're made by hundreds of different companies, each with their own shapes, sizes, materials, and design quirks. Some are round, some are square, some are rectangular, some are those awkward, almost square but not quite shapes that trick you into thinking the lid will fit until you press down and one side keeps popping up like it's mocking you. And it's not just shape. The plastic expands and contracts with temperature changes. You leave a lid in a hot dishwasher, it can warp slightly. You put the container in the freezer, it can shrink just enough that the perfect fit lid from last month now clicks on, but leaves one tiny corner sticking up. That's the kind of corner that looks harmless until you put soup in there and discover your fridge now smells like chicken noodle for eternity. Then there's the human factor. Over time, sets get mixed up. You bring lunch to work in one container, someone else brings theirs, lids get swapped, you let a friend borrow one, they return it with almost the same lid, and slowly your drawer becomes a graveyard of unmatched partners, and you're the sad matchmaker trying to make it work. What's wild is that there have been attempts to solve this. There are one-lid-fits-all sets, where every container is designed to match the same universal cover. Sounds brilliant, right? The problem is those lids tend to be bulkier and sometimes don't seal as tightly, so you trade compatibility for a soup leak risk. And there's also the issue of long-term use. One lid cracks and suddenly your universal set isn't so universal anymore. And let's be honest, even if you go full organizational ninja and buy matching sets, stacking them neatly, reality always wins. One rush night of shoving containers back into the drawer without stacking them properly, and boom, chaos returns. It's like entropy is personally targeting your kitchen. The real kicker is, if you actually measure the time spent rummaging for lids over a year, you'd probably be shocked. I'm convinced I've spent entire days of my life looking for that one lid for that one container I only use for leftovers that I never actually eat. Until some genius invents a truly indestructible, warp-proof universal lid that fits every single container ever made, this is one of those tiny everyday battles we'll keep fighting. And honestly, I think the container drawer enjoys watching us lose.
Leftover bread going stale. Bread is one of those foods that makes you feel like everything's going to be okay. There's just something comforting about it. The smell of a fresh loaf, the way it feels soft and warm in your hands, the way it turns even the laziest dinner into something that feels intentional. But here's the heartbreaking part. Bread is also one of the most short-lived joys in your kitchen. Think about it. You go to the bakery and you pick out the perfect loaf. You picture it in your head, toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, maybe a little bread with soup for dinner. You take it home, feeling like you've made a smart, wholesome choice. And then, a couple of days later, you reach for it, and it's gone from soft, fluffy happiness to something you could use as a doorstop. We've all been there. You grab a slice expecting it to bend gently, and instead, it creaks like an old wooden chair. You squeeze it, and it's got all the give of a brick. At that moment, you feel betrayed. Because you did everything right, didn't you? You kept it in the bag, you didn't leave it out in the open. So what happened? Most people think stale bread just means dry bread, like the moisture escaped while you weren't looking. And yeah, sure, it does lose a little moisture, but here's the sneaky truth. Bread can go stale even if it's in a sealed bag, even if you locked it in an airtight container. That's because it's not just about drying out. The bread itself is slowly changing on the inside. The soft parts are basically tightening up, which pushes the water around and makes the texture tough. You don't need a science degree to get it. Just think of it like your bread is slowly tensing its muscles until it's too stiff to chew. Now, here's where it gets worse. Some people try to be clever and keep their bread in the fridge. Seems logical, right? Cooler temperatures slow down food going bad. Except, with bread, the fridge actually speeds up the staling process. Yep, the cold makes it harden up way faster, so that loaf you thought would last a week is basically toast, and not the good kind, in 2 days. The only thing the fridge is really doing is buying you a little extra time before mold shows up, but by then the bread's already too far gone to enjoy. So what's the actual fix? Freezing it. Freezing's the only thing that really works. If you're not going to eat the whole loaf in a couple of days, slice it up, toss it in the freezer, and just pull out what you need. Toast it straight from frozen, and boom, it's like the bread never aged a day. Freezing basically presses the pause button on bread's slow munch towards staleness. Now, of course, the bread companies have their own tricks. Most supermarket bread lasts longer because they add preservatives and other ingredients that keep it soft for days. That's why a plastic-wrapped loaf from the store can be squishy a week later, while fresh bakery bread is already firming up after 48 hours. The trade-off? Those additives change the flavor and texture a little. Some people don't care, but others swear by fresh bread, even if it means racing against the clock to finish it. This isn't a new problem either. People have been fighting bread staleness for centuries. That's why so many classic recipes use day-old bread. Croutons? Day-old bread. French toast? Day-old bread. Bread pudding? You guessed it, day-old bread. These recipes weren't just happy accents. They were survival strategies. People figured out how to turn a loss into a win. The thing is, bread is stubborn. No matter how careful you are, it's always going to change over time. You can store it in a paper bag to keep the crust crunchy. You can store it in plastic to keep it soft. But eventually, nature takes over. The only real choice we have is how we deal with it. Eat it fast, freeze it early, or get really good at making croutons. So until someone invents a magical, preservative-free loaf that stays exactly as soft and fresh as the day you bought it, the story's always the same. You bring home bread, you love it, it gets older, and you either eat it out of obligation or you get creative. And maybe that's the hidden lesson here. Bread might not last forever, but the excuses to make French toast will. Public restroom hygiene without germ spread. Let's be honest, using a public restroom is a mental Olympics. You walk in, and it's like your brain suddenly switches into don't touch anything mode. You're calculating hand angles, elbow leverage, foot placement, basically turning into a ninja who's just trying to pee. And it's all because, deep down, we all share the same thought. I don't want to take any of this home with me. That's why touchless technology feels like such a gift from the hygiene gods. Automatic sinks, soap dispensers that sense your hands, toilets that flush on their own, paper towel machines that spit out just the right length. In theory, it's perfect. You never have to touch anything, so the germs don't get a free ride onto your hands. But here's the thing. Touchless tech isn't as flawless as we'd like to think. You've probably experienced it. You wave your hands under the soap dispenser and nothing. You wiggle them around like you're casting a spell. Still nothing. Then someone comes next to you and theirs works instantly.
Or the sink runs for 2 seconds and shuts off while your hands are still covered in soap. You're standing there like, cool, guess I'll just spread this foamy bacteria paste around for fun. And automatic toilets, don't get me started. Half the time, they flush when you just lean forward slightly. Hello, unexpected cold mist. The other half of the time, you're done, you stand up, and nothing. You do that awkward fake walk away, lean back in, wave your arm, anything to trigger it, all while praying no one notices. The big truth is, touchless doesn't mean contact-free. For one, most bathrooms still have a weak spot, the door. You wash your hands, feel proud of yourself, then you have to grab the same handle that 50 other unwashed hands grabbed before you. That's why some people master the paper towel shield move, using the towel to open the door. And if the bathroom only has air dryers, good luck. That door handle is basically a handshake with every stranger who's been there that day. Another issue, the sensors themselves. They're often covered in grime because people think, oh, I don't have to touch it, so it's cleaner. But airborne droplets, dust, and yes, germs still land on them. Plus, sometimes the sensors are badly placed, so you end up moving closer than you'd like. Hello, brushing against the sink basin where who knows what's been. And even when the tech works perfectly, there's still a catch. It can give people a false sense of security. Studies have shown that people using touchless systems sometimes wash their hands less thoroughly because they assume the germ risk is lower. But germs don't care if your faucet turned on automatically. If you don't scrub properly for 20 seconds, you're still taking little microbial souvenirs with you. Some places are trying to go all in. Fully touchless restrooms with motion sensor toilets, sinks, soap, and dryers, plus doors that push open with your shoulder or foot. That's the dream. But in reality, you often get a mix. Maybe the sink's automatic, but the soap isn't, or vice versa, or one stall is sensor flush and the next is manual. And once you have to touch one thing, you pretty much broken the whole chain of protection. And then there's the tech fail moments. Low batteries, blocked senses, or plain old bad design. If the touchless system breaks, what happens? People skip washing, skip flushing, skip the whole hygiene process because it's inconvenient, which, ironically, spreads more germs than if the place just had good old-fashioned working manual fixtures. So yeah, touchless tech helps a lot, but it's not a magic force field. You still need a plan. If there's a paper towel option, use it to open the door. If not, use your sleeve or push with your hip. Don't hover over the soap sensor forever. Just move to another one if possible. And most importantly, actually scrub your hands like you mean it. Because at the end of the day, avoiding germs in a public restroom is a team sport. And touchless tech is just one of the players. It's not perfect, but with a little strategy, you can still leave the restroom without feeling like you need to bathe in hand sanitizer.
Finding a pen that writes every time. Why is it that the moment you really need a pen, it decides to act like it's never seen paper before? You grab it, click or uncap it, put it to paper, and nothing. Just a weak scratch, like it's whispering instead of writing. You shake it, scribble in the corner, draw little spirals, and maybe, just maybe, the ink comes back. Or it doesn't, and you're now aggressively stabbing the paper like you're trying to summon ancient runes. It's honestly weird when you think about it. A pen's only job, its only reason for existing, is to put ink on paper. That's it. But somehow, half the pens in your house have retired early without telling you. And they don't even die in a dramatic, oops, the ink's gone way. No, they just stop working for no reason, like they're on strike. Sometimes the problem is obvious. Ink dries out if the pen's been left uncapped. That little ball in the tip of a ballpoint pen, it's supposed to keep the ink flowing smoothly while blocking air from getting in. But if it sits too long without use, ink near the tip can dry and clog it.
Once that happens, the ball can't roll freely, and suddenly you're drawing invisible lines. Other times, it's the opposite problem. The ink is too thin, maybe because the pen's been in the heat, and now it leaks. You stick it in your bag, and later discover it's turned into an artistic crime scene. Congratulations, your favorite notebook now has a giant Rorschach test on the inside cover. Gel pens are even fussier. Sure, they write smoothly when they do work, but they're like divas. Store them tip up, and gravity pulls the ink away from the tip, so the next time you grab it, it's dry at the business end. Ballpoint pens are tougher, but they're also prone to that frustrating, "I swear there's still ink in here, but it won't come out" issue. Felt tips, oh, they'll give you beautiful lines, right until the tip frays or the ink evaporates completely. The funniest part? Everyone has that one pen they guard like treasure because it actually works every time. You don't lend it out. You don't leave it on your desk at work where someone can accidentally keep it. It's a trusty sidekick, and you know one day it will disappear mysteriously, never to be seen again, probably stolen by the same black hole that eats socks from the laundry. We've all done the pen revival dance, too. You scribble hard on the corner of a page, shake it like a thermometer, tap the tip against the desk, blow into it as if that will somehow help, or run the tip over the sole of your shoe for friction heat. Sometimes it works, and you feel like a genius. Sometimes you just end up with ink on your fingers, your clothes, and a pen that still doesn't write. And don't even get me started on the cheap pen jar problem. You know that mug or container where you toss every free promotional pen, half-used pen, or random pen you found over the years? That jar is basically a graveyard. You think you're prepared because it's full, but the reality is 80% of those pens are dead, 10% are dying, and maybe 10% might work if you hold them at just the right angle on the perfect kind of paper. The thing is, pens are tiny engineering feats. Inside that little tube is a delicate balance of ink viscosity, air pressure, and tip mechanics. Temperature, humidity, and even how you store it can affect whether it writes. But when you're in the middle of needing to sign a form or jot down an idea, you don't care about science. You just want the thing to work. This is why some people switch to pencils, mechanical pencils, or digital note-taking, because at least those don't just randomly stop in the middle of a sentence. But there's still something satisfying about a smooth-writing pen, the kind that glides over paper like it was born to do it. The problem is, finding one that works every single time is like finding a mythical creature. So here's the unglamorous truth. If you want a pen to always work, you actually have to treat it like it matters. Keep caps on tight. Store ballpoints tip down so ink stays near the tip. Store gel pens flat, if possible. Don't leave them in hot cars or freezing environments. And every now and then, give them a quick scribble so they don't seize up from neglect. Will that guarantee your pen never fails you? Nope. Pens will still mysteriously betray you sometimes. But it'll happen less often. And when it does, at least you'll know it's not just you. It's the universal struggle of anyone who's ever tried to write something down. Because when it comes to pens, the motto is simple. They work perfectly until the exact moment you need them most.
Sock disappearance in laundry. You put a pair of socks in the laundry. You expect a pair to come out. Simple math, right? 2 in, 2 out. But somehow, somewhere between the washing machine and the drawer, one goes missing. And now you've got a lonely sock that will never see its partner again. It's one of life's great little mysteries. You didn't drop it on the way. You checked the washer. You checked the dryer. You even shook out your clothes, thinking maybe it got stuck somewhere. Nothing. Gone. Like it vanished into another dimension. A lot of people joke that washing machines have some kind of sock-eating portal inside them, a tiny black hole that only accepts one sock at a time. And honestly, it's easier to believe that than to accept the boring reality. The truth is, socks do disappear,
but for a bunch of small reasons that team up against you. First, their static cling. After drying, socks can stick to bigger clothes like shirts, hoodies, or bedsheets. They hitch a ride, and you only notice when you're folding laundry days later and find a sock clinging to your pajama pants. Then there's machine hide and seek. In front-loading washers, small items can slip between the rubber door seal and the drum, getting stuck until you fish them out. In top loaders, they can fall into the gap between the drum and the machine's outer wall. Some machines even have small spaces underneath or behind where socks can wedge themselves if they fall during loading. And of course, there's human error, the simplest culprit. Maybe the sock never even made it to the laundry basket, or it's still in your bedsheets from last night, or it dropped behind the dryer. We like to blame the machine, but sometimes we're just not as careful as we think. The most frustrating part is when you know you had both socks. You're certain. You even double-checked. But at the end, there's still one missing. Now you have to make the awkward decision, keep the single sock in hope its twin turns up, or throw it away and accept that your laundry just committed a small act of theft. Some people solve this with sock clips or by washing socks in mesh laundry bags so they can't escape. Others buy a dozen pairs of identical socks, so losing one doesn't matter. Still, there's something weirdly personal about losing a sock, especially if it's your favorite pair. Because here's the truth. No matter how many tips you follow, socks will still vanish sometimes. Laundry is basically a magic trick, and socks are the volunteer that disappears and never comes back.
Banana ripeness timing. Bananas are one of those foods that seem like they're messing with you on purpose. You buy them green from the store, thinking, perfect, I've got time. These'll last all week. Then, for a few days, nothing happens. They just sit there, still green, almost smug about it. Then one morning, you walk into the kitchen and boom, they're yellow, perfectly ripe, ready to eat. You feel like you've hit the jackpot. But here's the problem. You blink, and suddenly they've gone spotty brown, looking like they've aged 10 years overnight. That perfect yellow window feels like it lasts about 12 hours. Why does this happen? Well, bananas ripen because they release a gas called ethylene. Once they start producing it, it's like pressing fast forward on their own ripening process. And bananas are overachievers. They make a lot of ethylene compared to other fruits. That's why if you leave them next to apples or avocados, you'll notice those ripen faster too. Bananas are basically the bad influence of the fruit bowl. The tricky part is that ripening is not a steady, slow climb. It's more like a switch. Once the peel starts turning yellow, the starches inside start turning into sugar at a rapid pace. That's why they taste sweeter as they get spottier. But the same process also softens the fruit, and before you know it, they're mushy and attracting fruit flies. People have tried all sorts of tricks to slow this down. Wrapping the stems in plastic wrap to keep ethylene from spreading. Put them in the fridge once they're ripe. The peel will turn brown faster, but the inside stays okay a bit longer. Buying bananas in different ripeness stages so you have a banana schedule. Still, no matter how careful you are, bananas will always have that tiny, perfect window. Too early, and they're bland and starchy. Too late, and they're basically banana pudding still in the peel. Of course, some people love overripe bananas. They're softer, sweeter, and perfect for smoothies or banana bread. But if you wanted a nice fresh one for breakfast, sorry, the banana clock waits for no one. It's almost like bananas are testing your timing skills. Are they too green? You'll wait forever. Miss the ripe day? You'll be baking banana muffins tomorrow, whether you plan to or not.
Perfectly clean, Public water fountains. You know that feeling when you're walking outside on a hot day, maybe in a park, at a school, or somewhere downtown, and you spot one of those shiny public water fountains? You think, oh, thank goodness, free water, my savior. You walk up, lean down, press the button, and then you pause, because now you're wondering, is this water actually clean? Here's the tricky truth. Getting a public water fountain to stay perfectly clean is basically impossible. And it's not because people aren't trying. Maintenance crews scrub them, replace parts, test the water, but nature and physics just aren't on our side here. The main culprit? Biofilm. Think of biofilm like a microscopic city of bacteria, algae, and other tiny life forms that stick together and cling to surfaces. You can't really see it most of the time, but it's there, in the pipes, in the nozzle, even around the button you push. And once biofilm forms, it's like the bacteria have built themselves a little fortress. Regular cleaning can knock some of it out, but not all of it. And here's the wild part. Biofilm isn't just in gross, neglected fountains. It can happen anywhere water sits or flows slowly. That means even if the water itself is perfectly safe when it leaves the treatment plant, by the time it passes through the fountain's old pipes, bends, and nozzles, it's had plenty of time to pick up a little microbial hitchhiker or two. Add to that the fact that these fountains are out in the open. Wind blows dust and pollen into them. Birds fly overhead, bugs land on them, and of course, humans. People touch the nozzle, cough near it, or worse, put their mouth way too close. You've seen it, and it's never not disturbing. Now, engineers have tried to solve this. Some fountains are designed with laminar flow, meaning the water arches out smoothly without touching the nozzle. Others use UV light filters or special antimicrobial materials. But these upgrades are expensive. They break down, and they still can't stop biofilm from forming inside hidden parts of the system. That's why even if the water is, quote, safe to drink according to tests, you'll still sometimes notice a weird metallic taste or a faint musty smell. That's not necessarily dangerous, but it's enough to make you think twice. Some people even have fountain trust issues. They'd rather carry a bottle or wait until they get home, even if they're dying of thirst. Others, they shrug, take a sip, and hope their immune system enjoys the workout. At the end of the day, the idea of a perfectly clean public water fountain is kind of like expecting a public park bench to be completely germ-free. It's just not how the real world works. The best we can do is keep them as clean as possible. And maybe stop touching the nozzle with our mouths, please, for everyone's sake. Trolleys with straight wheels. You know that feeling when you walk into a supermarket, grab a trolley, and think, this time I'm gonna get a good one. You even test it first, push it a little, see if it glides. And for a glorious 5 seconds, everything's fine. Then you turn down the first aisle and there it is, the wobble. One wheel starts doing this weird cha-cha-cha, while the others are like, we're fine, what's your problem? Suddenly, your quiet grocery trip turns into a battle of strength and patience, where you're trying to steer something that clearly has its own plans for the day. It's like these trolleys have a secret club, the Brotherhood of Slightly Crooked Wheels. No matter which store you go to, no matter how new the trolley looks, at least one wheel will have a personality disorder. Sometimes it squeaks, sometimes it rattles, sometimes it pulls you violently toward the produce section,
Even when you're trying to head to the bakery, and you can't just swap it out mid-shop, you've already committed. Your milk's in there, your eggs, your dignity. But why does this happen? Well, part of it is design. Trolley wheels are made to swivel so you can turn easily. But the thing about swivel wheels is they really want to swivel. Add a little wear and tear, a bit of dirt or hair wrapped around the axle, and suddenly you've got a misalignment. That's when you get the death wobble. The wheel flips slightly sideways and starts rapidly oscillating like it's possessed. And here's the kicker. Supermarkets aren't replacing these wheels every week. Some of these trolleys are older than your car. Another reason? People. Yeah, we're the problem too. You know when someone pushes a trolley over the parking lot's bumpy concrete at high speed, or rams it into the cart bay like they're parking a bumper car, or leaves it outside in the rain so the bearings rust? That wheel you're fighting with today probably lived a rough life. It's been overloaded with 10 bottles of soda, dragged sideways when stuck, and maybe even ridden down a hill by a bored teenager. Stores do try to maintain them, but here's the sneaky part. Straight wheels are almost a myth because the smallest imperfection shows up right away. Even a slight bend in the stem or a tiny flat spot on the wheel can make it misbehave. It's like trying to walk normally with one shoe heel worn down. You could do it, but it's going to feel weird every step. And of course, we have to talk about that weird trolley physics. You can push it perfectly straight, but it somehow still veers left or right, forcing you to subtly wrestle it the entire trip. Ever notice how it's always toward the shelf you're passing, so you have to do that awkward lean to keep it from sideswiping the cereal boxes? If you're unlucky, you get the double curse, the wobble and the drift. That's when you truly earn your groceries. Here's the funny thing, engineers know how to make perfectly smooth rolling trolleys. Airports, for example, often have carts that roll like a dream. But supermarkets? They're balancing cost, maintenance, and the fact that no matter what they do, the public will find a way to break them. So the next time you're shopping and your trolley starts pulling you into the frozen pizza section like it's on autopilot, just know you're not alone. Millions of shoppers around the world are out there performing their own little quiet tug-of-war with a rebellious wheel. And honestly, it's kind of comforting. Sure, we've invented self-driving cars and reusable rockets, but when it comes to trolleys, we're all still just trying to keep it straight. Universal plugs. So, here's a little mystery about modern life. We can send live video to the other side of the planet in less than a second. We can talk to AI that sounds almost human. And we can land rovers on Mars. But we still can't agree on one single plug that works everywhere. Seriously, you'd think in the 21st century you could pack your phone charger, hop on a plane, and plug it in anywhere. Nope. The moment you travel, it's like you've entered a parallel universe where your perfectly good charger has suddenly turned into a useless plastic brick. Ever tried to plug something in overseas and realize the wall has completely different holes? Not just a different shape, sometimes a totally different philosophy. In one country, it's 2 flat pins. In another, it's 2 round pins. In some, it's 3 chunky prongs in a triangle. Then there's the one that looks like a suspicious smiley face with an attitude problem. And here's the kicker. There are over a dozen official plug types in the world right now. 13 to be exact. Why? History, stubbornness, and a sprinkle of national pride. Back in the early days of electricity, countries were basically doing their own thing. It wasn't like there was a big meeting where everyone sat down and said, "Okay, team, let's make one standard." Nope. Inventors and companies just made plugs that fit the sockets they designed. And because electricity was new, nobody was thinking about global travel. By the time the world started getting more connected, everyone had already built their infrastructure, and switching it all would have been insanely expensive. Imagine replacing every single outlet in every single building in your country. Yeah, not happening. So here we are, decades later, with this international mess. And sure, there are universal travel adapters, those chunky little cubes with slide-out prongs that claim to fit anywhere. But let's be real. Half the time you need to also stack another adapter on top of that because your plug is almost right, but not quite. And then you're looking at this ridiculous tower of plastic jutting out of the wall, just praying it doesn't fall out mid-charge. The voltage problem makes it even more fun. Not only do plugs differ, but the electricity they deliver can be totally different too. 110 volts in some countries, 220 in others. So even if your plug fits, your device might get a mild zap or a full-on electric execution. That's why some travelers carry those big, clunky voltage converters that feel like you're hauling around a small brick in your bag. And let's talk about the joy of realizing you forgot your adapter. You finally check into your hotel after a 12-hour flight, pull out your laptop, and nope. The plug's a completely alien shape. So now you're out in a strange city hunting for an electronics shop that sells adapters, which they always mark up because they know desperate travelers will pay anything. You could be standing there with an outlet right next to you, electricity just waiting to flow, but without that tiny piece of plastic, it's like being locked out of your own house. The dream of one universal plug? Oh, it's been discussed, but it's like asking every country to suddenly start driving on the same side of the road. Technically possible, but realistically a nightmare. Some places have even started moving toward USB ports, built directly into walls, which might be our closest shot at a universal solution. But until then, travelers everywhere will keep playing the plug lottery, hoping their prongs match the country's holes. So yeah, in a world where we can FaceTime from a mountaintop, order food from a phone, and talk to space probes millions of miles away, the humble wall socket is still winning the game of how can I make your life more complicated?
Potholes that stay fixed. If you drive, cycle, or even just walk around cities long enough, you'll notice one universal truth. Potholes are like zombies. They die for a bit, you think you're safe, and then a few months later, boom, they're back, right where you thought they were gone for good. Cities pour money into filling these things. You'll see road crews out there with shovels, hot asphalt, and a big roller, looking like they're performing some kind of modern-day road surgery. You think, great, that hole's finally gone. And for a little while, the road is smooth and quiet. But then it rains, or it freezes, or 1,000 cars roll over it, and the pothole slowly claws its way back to the surface like it's auditioning for a horror movie. The reason they're so stubborn comes down to a mix of physics, weather, and, let's be honest, sometimes cheap repair jobs. The asphalt is basically a mix of crushed stone and gooey black binder that's supposed to hold it together. When water seeps into tiny cracks, it can freeze in cold weather, expand, and push the pavement apart. Even without freezing, heavy trucks can pound on that weak spot until it starts to crumble. Eventually, little chunks of road get kicked out, and before you know it, pothole city. Here's the frustrating part. The fix is often more like a temporary Band-Aid than an actual cure. Instead of ripping up and rebuilding the damaged section from the base, a lot of repairs just pour some new asphalt into the hole and flatten it down. Problem is, if the foundation under the road is already damaged,
That new patch is basically sitting on a wobbly table. Give it a few months of rain, heat, and traffic, and it's back to square one. And then there's the budget problem. Permanent pothole fixes cost a lot more time and money, so cities often go for the quicker, cheaper patch to keep traffic moving. It's a little like putting duct tape on the leaking pipe. It'll work for now, but you know you'll be back fixing it again later. Of course, potholes aren't just annoying, they're expensive. Drivers hit them, blow out tires, bend rims, damage suspensions, and those repairs can cost hundreds. There are entire neighborhoods where people know exactly which roads to avoid because they've memorized the location of the tire killer potholes. There are better technologies out there, special polymers, infrared heating methods, even pothole-filling robots, but they're not used everywhere yet. And until they are, we're stuck in this endless loop of repair, crumble, repair, crumble. So yeah, potholes are basically the cockroaches of the road. They survive winter, they laugh at your repairs, and they always find their way back. Traffic jam prevention. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating mysteries of modern life. Traffic jams that shouldn't even exist. I'm not talking about the ones caused by accidents or construction zones. I mean the weird kind where you're cruising along the highway at 80, then suddenly brake lights. You slow down, crawl for a few minutes, then nothing. The road clears. No crash, no lane closure, no police car. It's like the jam just evaporated. What was that? This is called a phantom traffic jam, and it's basically human nature turned into a highway nightmare. Here's how it works. One driver taps the brakes. Maybe they got distracted, maybe they thought they saw something ahead, or maybe they just weren't paying attention. The car behind them brakes a little harder, the car behind that brakes even harder, and within seconds, you've got a chain reaction that ripples backward like a slow-motion wave of frustration. By the time it reaches you, there's no sign of the original cause, just stop-and-go misery. You'd think self-driving cars would fix this, right? That's the dream. Robotic chauffeurs talking to each other, keeping perfect distance, adjusting speeds in harmony like a symphony of steel. But here's the reality. Even the most advanced self-driving systems can't control every car on the road. They still have to interact with human drivers, and those humans are the wild cards. Plus, the technology isn't perfect yet. Sensors can get confused by bad weather, weird road markings, or, my favorite, drivers who refuse to let a self-driving car merge because they don't trust robots. Then there's something called traffic flow instability. Basically, roads have a breaking point. Too many cars packed into a stretch of highway means even tiny disruptions, like a driver sneezing, can create stop-and-go waves. It's a bit like filling a sink to the brim. One drop too many, and it spills. The more crowded the road, the easier it is for chaos to start. City planners have tried all kinds of fixes, ramp meters that limit how many cars enter a highway at once, variable speed limits that slow everyone down before a bottleneck, even special lanes for vehicles that can communicate with each other. But here's the catch. These systems only work if people follow the rules.
And let's be real, plenty of drivers ignore them completely. One of the biggest culprits is something called the accordion effect. Everyone speeds up when they see an open road, then slams the brakes when they catch up to slower traffic. It's exhausting, it wastes fuel, and it turns what should be a smooth trip into a jerky stop-start mess. And the worst part is this could be reduced dramatically if drivers simply kept consistent spacing and avoided sudden braking. But that's like asking people to never check their phone at a red light. So even in 2025, with all our tech, AI, and fancy sensors, we still haven't solved it. The dream is that one day, every car will be smart enough to communicate in real time, like birds flying in formation. Until then, traffic jams, especially the phantom kind, are here to stay. And yes, that means more mornings of gripping the wheel, sipping cold coffee, and wondering why you're stuck in a jam with no reason in sight.
Fog-free car windows without wiping. You're driving along, maybe on a cold morning or a rainy night, and suddenly your windshield starts looking like someone smeared petroleum jelly all over it. The world outside goes blurry, street lights turn into fuzzy halos, and you start doing that awkward dance of adjusting every button on your dashboard, hoping one of them magically fixes it before you have to pull over and wipe the glass with your sleeve. Why does this happen? Well, it's all about temperature and humidity. Basically, science playing a prank on you. The air inside your car holds moisture from your breath, wet clothes, maybe even that coffee you spilled last week. When the glass is colder than the air inside, that moisture condenses into tiny water droplets on the surface. Boom! Instant fog. It's the same reason your bathroom mirror fogs up after a hot shower. Now, here's where things get frustrating. Anti-fog coatings exist. You can buy sprays or wipes that claim to keep your windows crystal clear. Some car manufacturers even apply a thin anti-fog layer on the inside of the glass. And yes, they work for a while. But here's the problem. Those coatings wear off really quickly. Every time you wipe the glass, every time dust settles on it, every time the surface gets touched, the magic layer gets thinner until it's basically gone. Before you know it, you're back to square one. Even the high-end stuff isn't perfect. Some coatings leave a streaky film, others attract dust, and some just stop working after a few weeks. It's not that scientists can't make a better formula, it's that real life is messy. Cars are exposed to constant temperature changes, vibrations, cleaning, and grime. Keeping a perfectly uniform anti-fog layer under those conditions is like trying to keep a chalk drawing intact during a windstorm. The most reliable solution right now is using your car's defogger or air conditioning, balance the temperature and humidity levels inside. But that's not instant, and it can be super annoying when you're already late for work. In winter, you might have to blast cold air at your face just to clear the windshield. In summer, you might need to crank the AC, even if you're freezing, just to dry the air inside. It's not exactly the most comfortable fix. Some inventors have tried clever ideas like glass that heats itself just enough to stay above the dew point, or built-in microfans that keep air circulating along the glass surface. But these add cost, complexity, and sometimes more things that can break. So most car makers stick with the old-fashioned let-the-driver-figure-it-out approach, until someone invents a permanent, wipe-proof anti-fog coating that survives years of daily use. We're stuck with the current juggling act. turn on the defroster, adjust the vents, maybe crack a window, and hope the fog clears before you miss your exit. And yes, there will always be that one desperate moment where you just grab a tissue, smear the fog into oblivion, and tell yourself you'll clean it properly later, knowing you probably won't.
Escalators that don't break constantly. You've probably had this happen. You're at a busy mall, airport, or train station, and you spot the escalator that's supposed to carry you effortlessly upward like a moving staircase to glory. But when you get closer, bam, it's not moving. The lights are still on. Maybe there's a sad little out-of-service sign taped to the handrail, and now you're trudging up the steps like it's a regular staircase, which, let's be honest, feels way more exhausting than a real staircase for some reason. So why do escalators break down so often? Well, the short answer is they're mechanical beasts. Every step you see is connected to a chain system underneath, all running on gears, bearings, and motors. That's a lot of moving parts, and moving parts love to wear out. Add in the fact that escalators are running all day, every day, carrying thousands of people, and it's like expecting a treadmill to work perfectly after a marathon every single hour. But it's not just normal wear and tear. Escalators live a rough life. Think about the abuse they take. Kids jumping on the steps, people dropping drinks, tiny bits of trash or grit getting stuck in the mechanism. And don't forget the endless parade of luggage wheels, shopping carts, and strollers. All that debris and friction doesn't just slow things down, it can chew up parts in record time. Then there's the safety factor. Escalators are built with a ton of safety sensors. If something even slightly unusual happens, like a step being misaligned, a handrail moving out of sync, or a foreign object getting caught, the system will stop immediately. And while that's great for preventing accidents, it also means escalators break down a lot simply because they're being cautious. Sometimes the fix is quick, but other times a technician has to take apart half the machine to find the problem. And here's the kicker. Escalator repairs aren't fast. These things are basically custom built for the exact spot they're in. You can't just walk into a hardware store and grab an escalator step off the shelf. If a part breaks, you might be waiting days or weeks for a replacement. Meanwhile, the whole machine just sits there looking perfectly usable while you get your cardio in. Some places have tried to solve the downtime problem by making escalators modular so parts can be swapped quickly. Others are testing smarter monitoring systems that can detect wear before it turns into a breakdown. But the reality is, with so many moving parts, under constant strain, even the best-maintained escalator is going to need regular rest. So next time you see one stopped, it's not because it's lazy. It's probably tired, sore, and waiting for a piece of metal from a factory hundreds of miles away. And until it arrives, that magical moving staircase is just a really awkward flight of stairs. Lightweight, puncture-proof bicycle tires. Picture this. You're riding your bike on a sunny morning, wind in your hair, feeling like you're in a music video. And then, psst, that awful sound of air escaping your tire. You look down, and sure enough, you've hit a piece of glass, a nail, or something that nature definitely didn't design to be bicycle-friendly. Now your smooth ride has turned into a wobbly, sweaty walk home. It's one of those problems cyclists have been trying to solve for decades. How do you make a tire that's both super light and completely puncture-proof? And the annoying answer is, you can't.
At least, not without giving up something else important. Let's break it down. Traditional bike tires are basically a flexible rubber tube filled with air, which makes them light, bouncy, and comfortable to ride on. The air acts like a cushion, smoothing out bumps and cracks in the road. But that same softness is exactly why sharp objects can push through so easily. So, engineers tried adding thicker rubber layers or Kevlar linings in tires. That definitely helps with punctures. You can roll over thorns, glass, or even small nails without a problem. But it also makes the tire heavier. And when your tire is heavier, pedaling feels harder, acceleration slows down, and your legs have to work more. Not great if you actually like feeling fast. Then there are solid tires, no air inside at all. These are basically made of dense foam or hard rubber, so they can't go flat. Problem solved, right? Not exactly. Solid tires are really heavy, and because they don't flex like air-filled ones, they feel stiff and unforgiving on the road. Every bump, crack, and pothole sends a jolt straight up your spine. You might save time fixing flats, but you'll probably lose it massaging your lower back later. Recently, some companies have experimented with high-tech materials like NASA's shape memory alloys or special polymers that flex like air but resist punctures. Sounds awesome, but so far they're expensive, tricky to produce, and not widely available. Plus, when they do fail, they can be harder to repair than just swapping a regular tube. So, why don't we have the perfect tire yet? It's all about the trade-off. Want lightweight, you lose puncture resistance. Want puncture-proof, you sacrifice comfort and speed. Want both? Be ready to pay a small fortune and still accept some compromises. Cyclists have learned to play the middle game, choosing tires with enough protection to avoid most flats, but still light enough to keep rides enjoyable. And they carry a repair kit just in case, because no matter how fancy the tire, the world will always find a way to sneak a sharp little surprise onto your path. Until someone invents that magical, weightless, unbreakable tire, flats are just part of the biking adventure. Annoying, yes, but also a good excuse to take a break and pretend you totally meant to stop and enjoy the view. Quiet airplane cabins without pressure discomfort. Let's be honest, flying is a miracle of modern engineering that still somehow manages to feel like you're trapped in a loud metal tube while your head slowly inflates like a balloon. You know the routine, you board, settle into your seat, and within minutes there's this constant roar of engines in the background, like a giant white noise machine that never takes a break. Add to that the slow, sneaky ear pressure buildup, and by the time you land, you're either chewing gum like a maniac or doing that awkward jaw stretch thing that makes you look like you're silently screaming. So here's the big question. Why haven't we fixed this yet? Why can't airplane cabins be whisper quiet and pressure-free? The short answer? The tech exists, but making it work for hundreds of people at once, thousands of times a day, is a whole different beast. Let's start with the noise. Airplanes are loud because of two main culprits: engines. Even with modern soundproofing, those massive turbines are basically controlled explosions spinning at insane speeds. Airflow. The faster you move through the sky, the more wind noise you get as air rushes around the fuselage. Yes, some newer planes like the Boeing 787 Dreamliner are quieter than older ones. They use special materials and engine designs to muffle the noise. But truly quiet cabins? That's tricky. You can't just slap on more insulation because that adds weight, which burns more fuel, which costs more money. And airlines love saving money even more than you love a peaceful nap. Now, about that ear pressure. The root problem is cabin pressurization. Planes fly way up high, around 30,000 to 40,000 feet, where the air is so thin you'd pass out without help. To keep you alive and able to drink tomato juice without it boiling, yes, that's the thing. The cabin is pressurized to feel more like you're at about 6,000 to 8,000 feet. That's much better than the actual outside pressure, but it's still different from ground level. So when the plane climbs or descends, the pressure in your ears gets out of sync with the cabin. Your eardrum ends up stretched like cling film over a bowl, and your body has to work to balance it. That's why swallowing, yawning, or chewing gum helps. It opens your eustachian tubes and lets the pressure equalize. Some planes do have tech to make this easier. The Dreamliner, for example, can maintain a lower cabin altitude, meaning the air pressure feels closer to sea level, which helps reduce ear discomfort. But again, not every airline uses these planes because they're expensive. And here's the other thing. Making a cabin both ultra-quiet and perfectly pressure-balanced is a juggling act. Pressurization systems themselves make noise. Ventilation systems make noise. Even the air conditioning hum adds to it. If you try to silence all of that, you risk cutting off airflow or cooling, which is a fast track to stuffy cabin full of cranky passengers. So the dream of a silent and pressure-free flight isn't science fiction. It's just a luxury problem airlines aren't in a hurry to spend billions solving. They can't make things better, sure, but perfect? That might stay in the private jet world for a while. Until then, we're left with our survival kit, noise-canceling headphones, gum, maybe a neck pillow, and the hope you'll sleep through most of the flight. And when you land without your ears popping painfully, that's not just luck. That's you winning the unofficial in-flight lottery.
Pedestrian crossings that sync with human pace. You've been there. You step up to a pedestrian crossing, the little green man lights up, and you start walking. At first, it's fine. You're making good progress. And then, halfway across, the timer starts flashing like a doomsday clock, and suddenly, you're not just walking, you're doing that awkward half-jog, half-speed walk thing, hoping you make it before it flips to red. Or the opposite happens. You hit the button, the light turns green, and you've got so much time left over you could do a little dance in the middle of the road before it changes again. Here's the thing. Most pedestrian crossings are set with a default pace, and it's not based on how real people actually walk. In many places, traffic engineers use an assumed speed of around 1.2 meters per second. That's fine for young, able-bodied adults, but what about kids or elderly people? Or someone carrying groceries, or walking with a stroller, or nursing an injury? For them, that speed is basically saying, good luck. The problem is, crossing times are often locked into citywide traffic patterns. Change one intersection's timing, and it can mess up the whole system, creating traffic jams or unsafe overlaps. So instead of tailoring the walk signal to the actual people using it, cities rely on generic numbers that don't reflect the full range of human pace. Some places are trying to fix this. There are smart crossings, that use sensors or cameras to detect how many people are waiting and adjust the green light accordingly. If the crowd is moving slowly, the light stays on longer. If the crossing is empty, it switches back quickly to keep traffic flowing. Sounds perfect, right? Well, not quite. These systems are expensive, need constant maintenance, and raise privacy concerns when cameras are involved. And even with smart tech, there's still a balancing act between giving people enough time to cross safely and keeping car drivers from losing their minds in a long red light queue. So for now, pedestrian crossings are stuck in this awkward middle ground, sometimes too fast, sometimes too slow, rarely just right. And if you ever feel like you're sprinting for your life in the middle of the street, it's not just you being dramatic. It's the system being built for average humans who mostly exist in theory, not reality. Trains that never run late. Let's be real. There's a special kind of heartbreak that happens when you're standing on the platform, clutching your coffee, maybe a little proud that you got there on time, only to hear that robotic announcement, "We apologize for the delay." Sometimes they give you a reason. Signal failure, track maintenance, earlier incident. And sometimes they just don't. The train is late, and that's all you get. Now, you'd think in 2025, with satellites, real-time GPS, advanced scheduling software, and decades of experience running railways, trains should be as punctual as clockwork. But here's the truth. There are a lot of moving pieces, and not just the train itself. For starters, the tracks are basically highways for trains. If one train is late, it messes with the timing for every train behind it. And unlike cars, trains can't just overtake each other whenever they feel like it. They're locked to a specific set of rails, so if there's a delay, it ripples through the entire schedule like a domino effect. And then there's the weather. Heavy rain, slippery rails. Snow, frozen switches. Heat waves, tracks can actually expand and warp, and storms can knock out electrical systems faster than you can say replacement bus service. And don't forget the human element. More passengers than usual trying to board at peak times slows everything down. Mechanical problems, even something as small as a door refusing to shut, can halt a whole service. And, of course, the occasional person who presses the emergency button for not quite an emergency. Some countries, like Japan, are famous for running trains almost to the second. But that level of precision costs serious money. Constant maintenance, highly trained staff, and infrastructure that's obsessively monitored. Many other places just can't maintain that standard without huge investment. So while trains that never run late sounds like a simple engineering goal, in practice, it's like trying to juggle while someone keeps throwing extra balls at you. The system is always one unexpected event away from chaos. And that's why, despite all the tech and planning, you'll probably keep hearing that familiar phrase, "We apologize for the delay."
Elevators that always stop level with the floor. You know that tiny, awkward moment when an elevator stops, the doors open, and the floor you're stepping onto is either slightly higher or slightly lower than the elevator itself? It's never much, maybe just a few centimeters, but enough to make you do that weird half-step shuffle so you don't trip. It seems like such a small thing to get right. I mean, elevators are basically just big metal boxes going up and down on cables. How hard could it be to make them stop perfectly flush every single time? Well, harder than you think. Here's the deal. Elevators don't just slam to a stop. They slow down gradually, and the exact stopping point is controlled by a mix of sensors, brakes, and sometimes old-fashioned mechanical systems. Over time, cables stretch, pulleys wear, sensors drift out of calibration. And if the elevator is carrying a lot of weight, say it's full of people, the extra load can cause the car to settle slightly lower than intended when it stops. Temperature changes can also play a role. Metal expands and contracts with heat and cold, which can subtly affect the stopping point. Add in building shifts over years. Yes, tall buildings can sway and settle, and you've got more variables than you'd expect for what seems like a simple "stop here" command. In brand new elevators, you'll often notice perfect alignment, but as they age, even with regular maintenance, tiny inconsistencies creep in. And while it might feel like a design flaw, most of the time it's considered harmless unless the misalignment is big enough to be a tripping hazard, in which case the elevator gets adjusted. So yeah, that little floor mismatch isn't you being clumsy. It's the result of physics, mechanics, and good old-fashioned wear and tear. We've gotten elevators to be incredibly safe and reliable, but getting them to land perfectly flush every single ride? Still an unsolved mini-mystery of daily life.
Windshield wipers that work in all rain speeds. Have you ever noticed how windshield wipers seem to have a sweet spot and then completely betray you outside of it? Light drizzle. They drag across the glass and make that squeaky noise. Heavy downpour. They start skipping like they're breakdancing. And in that in-between misty rain, they smear water instead of clearing it. It feels like something we should have perfected by now. We can send rovers to Mars, but can't make wipers that work equally well in all rain conditions? The problem is, water on glass behaves differently depending on droplet size, temperature, and wind speed. Tiny mist droplets stick stubbornly to the glass. Bigger drops get pushed by the air as you drive. And if it's cold, the water can mix with frost or ice, making things even messier. Wipers themselves are pretty simple. Just a rubber blade on a metal or plastic arm powered by a motor. But that rubber wears out, hardens in the sun, or gets nicked by dirt and grit. And as soon as the blade isn't perfectly smooth, it leaves streaks. Plus, the force pressing the blade to the glass isn't always consistent. At higher speeds, wind can actually lift the blade slightly off the glass, making it chatter or skip. There are fancy adaptive wipers now, with sensors that detect rain intensity and adjust their speed automatically. Sounds great, right? Until you're in weird weather where it's raining harder on one side of the windshield than the other, and the system just gets confused. Some high-end cars even try to replace wipers entirely with air jets or water-repellent coatings, but those have their own issues and aren't exactly mainstream yet. So we're stuck in this middle ground where wipers mostly work until they don't. It's one of those small, everyday annoyances that make you think, really? We can't fix this yet? And until we do, we'll keep fiddling with that little stalk next to the steering wheel,
desperately searching for that perfect, magical wiper speed that lasts about 30 seconds before the rain changes again.
Painless mosquito bites prevention. All right, let's talk about mosquitoes. Those tiny vampires of the insect world. For such a small creature, they've done a really good job at making themselves humanity's eternal nemesis. I mean, think about it. We've put a man on the moon. We've made phones that can translate languages in real time. We've got robots exploring Mars. But we still can't stop a bug the size of a sesame seed from stabbing us in the skin and stealing our blood. And it's not like we haven't tried. We've invented mosquito nets, sprays, creams, those little zappers that look like tennis rackets, even apps that claim to emit mosquito-repelling frequencies. Spoiler alert, those don't work. But no matter what, these little guys always find a way. It's like they've been studying us. You put up a mosquito net, somehow there's one inside when you wake up. You spray your arms and legs, it'll bite your ankle right through your socks like it's reading the fine print of your mosquito repellent contract. The problem is, prevention methods aren't perfect because nature made mosquitoes persistent. They can sense the carbon dioxide you breathe out from meters away. They can pick up on body heat like tiny heat-seeking missiles. Some species even seem to prefer certain blood types. And if you happen to be one of their favorites, well, congratulations. You're basically an all-you-can-eat buffet. Mosquito nets? Great in theory until you realize they only work if you're completely inside them without a single gap. And the fabric has to be fine enough to keep out the smallest species, which also makes it a little hot and stuffy in tropical weather. Bug sprays, they work until they don't. Sweat, water, or just time will wear them off. Plus, let's be honest, no one actually enjoys smelling like a mix of chemicals and citronella candles all night. We've tried going high-tech too. There are CO2 traps that lure mosquitoes in and kill them. There are special clothes treated with insecticides. Some scientists are even genetically engineering mosquitoes so they can't reproduce or carry diseases. But here's the thing. Even with all of that, there are still billions of them out there breeding like mosquitoes. And it's not just the itch that's the problem. In many parts of the world, mosquito bites can mean malaria, dengue, Zika, yellow fever, diseases that still affect millions every year. So this isn't just a comfort issue, it's a real health battle. Yet here we are, in 2025, still swatting at our arms and legs like cavemen, hoping the bug gets squished before it takes another sip. So why haven't we found the painless, perfect prevention? Because to stop them completely, you'd have to block every signal they use to find us. Our smell, our breath, our body heat, our movement, and you'd have to do it without turning yourself into a sweaty mess or covering your skin in a chemical shield 24/7. Until we figure that out, it's basically a game of minimize the bites. Sleep under a net, use the spray, wear long sleeves if you can, run a fan to blow them off course, and if all else fails, keep that satisfying mosquito slap reflex ready. Because sometimes, old school is the only school that works.
Cold cures. All right, let's talk about the common cold. That annoying little viral gift humanity keeps getting no matter how advanced we get. We've invented vaccines for polio, eradicated smallpox, and can replace entire organs with transplants. But the common cold? Nope. Still here, still ruining your week whenever it feels like it. And here's the thing. Every time you feel one coming on, there's always that one person who swears they have the cure. Drink hot lemon water with ginger and honey. Take vitamin C every hour. Reb Vicks on your feet and wear socks to bed. And you try them because why not? You want to believe. But deep down, you know the truth. Nothing actually cures a cold.
The problem is, the common cold isn't one single disease. It's a whole collection of viruses, over 200 different kinds, with rhinoviruses being the most troublesome makers. And here's the kicker. They mutate constantly. So even if you could make a vaccine for one strain, there are hundreds of others just waiting to sneeze their way into your life. So what do we do instead? We treat the symptoms. You've got a sore throat, lozenges, warm drinks, maybe some gargling. Stuffy nose, decongestants and tissues. Lots and lots of tissues. Fever, paracetamol or ibuprofen. Basically, it's like telling your body, all right, I can't kick this thing out yet, but I can make you more comfortable while we wait for your immune system to do the heavy lifting. Of course, some people swear by natural remedies. Echinacea tea, garlic soup, apple cider vinegar shots. And while some of those might have small benefits, most of them work mainly because you're resting, hydrating, and giving your body time to recover. Which, ironically, is exactly what you'd be doing without them. The truth is, colds usually run their course in about a week. Sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. And until scientists figure out how to safely target hundreds of constantly changing viruses at once, curing them just isn't realistic. That's why every miracle cure you hear about either doesn't hold up in studies or only helps in a small, temporary way. So for now, the best we can do is manage the misery. Rest, fluids, decent food, maybe some binge watching while you're bundled up in bed. And remind yourself, while you can't stop a cold dead in its tracks, your immune system's been handling them for thousands of years. You've beaten every cold you've ever had. This one's no different, even if it does make you sound like a congested kazoo for a few days.
Hangover prevention that works. You've had a big night. Music's loud, the vibes are good, the drinks keep coming, and then morning arrives. Your head is pounding, your mouth feels like a desert, your stomach is doing somersaults, and you're questioning every life choice you ever made. That's a hangover. Nature's way of saying, you had fun yesterday. Cool. Now pay up. Every year, someone claims they've found the hangover cure. Coconut water, pickle juice, greasy breakfast, raw eggs, electrolyte packets, fancy pills at the pharmacy with names like Party Shield or Recovery Boost. But here's the truth. There's no magic fix that makes a hangover vanish instantly. The main culprit is alcohol itself, or more specifically, how your body processes it. Alcohol is a diuretic, which means it makes you lose more water than you take in. That's why dehydration is a huge part of the problem. Add in the fact that alcohol messes with your sleep, irritates your stomach lining, and leaves toxic byproducts like ethyl aldehyde in your system, and you've got the perfect recipe for a next-day disaster. Hydration definitely helps. If you drink water alongside your drinks and before bed, you might reduce the damage. Eating before or while drinking can also slow down alcohol absorption. And pacing yourself, that's the ultimate cure, though it's more prevention than anything. The problem is, once the hangover is here, your body basically just needs time to clear out the mess. That means rest, water, maybe some electrolytes, and something gentle on the stomach. Coffee might make you feel more awake, but it won't undo the chemical chaos in your body. Painkillers like ibuprofen can help with the headache, but they won't cure the hangover itself.
Scientists have studied this, and while some supplements show tiny benefits in small trials, nothing has consistently proven to be a universal, reliable hangover eliminator. Your liver still has to do its job, and it's not in a hurry just because you've got brunch plans. So, for now, the best hangover prevention isn't a magic pill. It's moderation, hydration, and knowing when to call it a night. But let's be honest, that's advice most of us only remember after the hangover hits.
Painless vaccine delivery. Let's be honest, nobody loves needles. Even if you're not the type to faint at the sight of one, there's always that tiny sting, the awkward arm tensing, and the silent hope that the nurse is having a steady hand day. Vaccines are one of the greatest medical breakthroughs in history, but the delivery method? Still stuck in the sharp metal into skin era. Researchers have been chasing the dream of painless vaccine delivery for years. Microneedle patches, jet injectors, nasal sprays, all promising a quick, stress-free experience. Microneedle patches use hundreds of microscopic tips that barely go deep enough to trigger pain sensors, and they can even be self-administered. Jet injectors use high-pressure streams of liquid to push the vaccine through the skin without breaking it. Nasal sprays, in theory, skip the skin altogether and target the immune system through mucous membranes. So why are most of us still lining up for the traditional jab? Two big reasons: cost and consistency. Needles are cheap, reliable, and require minimal fancy equipment. Alternative methods often need special storage, have shorter shelf lives, or can't deliver certain vaccine types effectively. For some vaccines, the body's best immune response only happens when the shot goes into muscle, and that's hard to beat without a needle. There's also the testing and approval process. Changing the delivery method for a vaccine isn't just a simple swap. It requires years of trials to make sure it's as safe and effective as the old way. Even if a patch works in the lab, scaling it up to billions of doses while keeping it affordable is another mountain to climb. That said, progress is happening. Some flu vaccines have nasal spray options, and microneedle patches for measles and COVID-19 have been in advanced testing. In a few decades, we might look back at metal syringes as a relic of the past. But for now, the little pinch is still part of the deal.
Effective long-term weight loss for everyone. If there's one thing the diet industry loves, it's promising the one true method for weight loss. Low carb, high protein, keto, intermittent fasting, juice cleanses, eat like a caveman plans. You name it, someone's packaged it, branded it, and slapped a before and after photo on the box. And yet, despite decades of books, programs, and billion-dollar marketing, there's still no universal, sustainable method that works for everyone. Part of the problem is biology. Our bodies aren't identical machines. They're more like custom-built, slightly unpredictable systems. Two people can eat the exact same foods and exercise the same amount, but see completely different results. Hormones, metabolism speed, Muscle mass, gut bacteria, genetics all play a role in how our bodies handle calories. Then there's the survival instinct baked into our DNA. Your body doesn't know you're trying to look good for summer. It thinks you're in a famine. Drop your calorie intake too much, and your metabolism can slow down, making it harder to lose weight and easier to gain it back. This is why so many diets work in the short term, then hit a frustrating plateau. Lifestyle and environment matter too. A plan that's easy for a single person with lots of free time might be impossible for a parent working 2 jobs. Cultural food habits, stress levels, sleep quality, even where you live can all affect long-term results. That's why something like the Mediterranean diet might feel effortless for someone in Greece, but like an expensive chore for someone in a cold, rural town. Researchers agree on a few universal truths. Long-term weight loss usually works best with gradual changes, a mix of exercise, and eating patterns you can actually live with, not just survive for 30 days. But even then, the specifics are deeply personal. So the frustrating truth? There's no magic formula that works for everyone. The best plan is the one you can stick with for years, not weeks. And that means some trial, error, and patience. Anyone promising otherwise is probably trying to sell you something.
Eliminating body odor without harsh chemicals. Body odor might seem like a purely hygiene issue, but it's actually a mix of biology, chemistry, and the stubbornness of human sweat glands. The smell we think of as sweat isn't actually from the sweat itself. Fresh sweat is mostly odorless. The problem starts when that moisture mixes with bacteria living on your skin, especially in warm, dark places like your armpits. These bacteria break down the sweat into fatty acids and ammonia-like compounds, and that's when the funk kicks in. Most deodorants tackle the problem by doing one of 2 things: masking the smell with strong fragrances, or trying to kill the bacteria with chemicals like triclosan or alcohol. Antiperspirants go further by blocking your sweat glands with aluminum salts, which reduce moisture and slow bacterial growth. The problem? These solutions are short-term fixes. The bacteria eventually come back, sweat production resumes, and by mid-afternoon, so does the smell. Many people want a better solution, something that works all day, doesn't require reapplication, and avoids potentially harsh or irritating chemicals. Natural options like baking soda, magnesium, essential oils, and probiotics have gained popularity, but they often wear off quickly or don't work for everyone. Some biotech companies are experimenting with genetically modifying skin bacteria so they produce pleasant scents instead of bad ones, but that's still in the experimental stage. The other hurdle is that sweat is part of our body's natural cooling and detox system, so shutting it down entirely could cause other problems. Any truly permanent fix would have to stop the odor without interfering with sweat's core purpose, and that's trickier than it sounds. For now, we're stuck in a daily cycle. Apply something in the morning, hope it holds through the day, and maybe keep a travel-sized backup just in case. It's one of those small,
universal human problems that science hasn't cracked yet, even though almost everyone wishes they could.
Reliable insomnia cure. Insomnia sounds like a simple problem. Can't sleep? Just relax. Close your eyes and drift off. But anyone who's ever spent hours staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. knows it's not that simple. Sleep isn't like flipping a switch. It's more like landing a plane. It takes a sequence of signals, conditions, and routines for your brain to decide, okay, now's the time. And when even one part of that system goes wrong, sleep can slip out of reach. You've probably heard the standard advice: avoid caffeine late in the day. Keep your bedroom dark and cool. Limit screen time before bed. Stick to a routine. That's all good advice, and for some people it works. But for others, insomnia isn't caused by just one bad habit. It's a tangle of stress, overactive thoughts, hormonal changes, or even genetics. And when your brain decides it's not going to power down, you can have the perfect conditions and still be wide awake. Over-the-counter sleep aids, herbal teas, and melatonin supplements can help some people, but they often only work short-term, or they leave you groggy the next morning. Prescription medications can be effective, but they come with risks like dependency or strange side effects. Even cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which has some of the best long-term results, isn't a magic overnight fix. The truth is, there's no single button we can push to make the brain sleep on demand. Sleep is regulated by a delicate mix of circadian rhythms, brain chemistry, and mental state, and science hasn't figured out a universal way to reset that system for everyone. So, for now, many of us are left lying in bed, counting sheep, replaying embarrassing moments from 10 years ago, or wondering how on earth our body can feel exhausted but still refuse to shut down. It's one of those problems humans have been trying to solve for centuries, and we're still just scratching the surface.
Regrowing human teeth naturally. Let me ask you something. If you've ever chipped a tooth, lost one, or had to get a crown, didn't you wish your body could just grow a new one? I mean, it works for sharks. It works for crocodiles. Heck, even some lizards can lose and regrow teeth like it's no big deal. But us? We get exactly 2 sets in a lifetime. Baby teeth and adult teeth, and that's it. After that, the tooth fairy is officially out of business. And it feels weird, right? We've got technology that can put a camera inside your arteries, perform surgery with lasers, and literally edit your DNA. But we can't grow a 3rd set of molars. Seems like it should be easy, until you dig into why it's actually so ridiculously complicated. Here's the deal. The ability to grow new teeth is locked deep inside our genetics. When we're still developing in the womb, special cells called stem cells form these little tooth buds in our jaws.
Those buds decide how many teeth we'll have in our lifetime. For humans, it's programmed to be 2 batches and done. Sharks, their programming is infinite. Their tooth buds just keep making new teeth forever. Think of it like a printer that either runs out of ink after 2 pages or never runs out at all. Unfortunately, evolution didn't give us the unlimited refill setting. Now, scientists have actually found hints that the blueprint for growing teeth again might still be hiding in our DNA. There's a rare condition called hyperdontia, where people grow extra teeth well into adulthood. These bonus teeth aren't always perfect. Sometimes they grow in weird places, like behind existing ones. But it proves the body can still trigger tooth growth under certain conditions. It's just that, for most of us, the switch stays turned off. So you'd think the next step would be simple. Flip that genetic switch back on, let our gums do their thing, and boom, problem solved. But it's not that easy. Our mouths are complex ecosystems. New teeth need precise spacing, alignment, and connection to jawbone nerves. Grow them in the wrong spot or wrong angle, and suddenly you're dealing with pain, speech issues, or an orthodontic nightmare. That's why dentists can't just wake up your tooth buds. The process has to be tightly controlled. Of course, humans being humans, we've already tried some wild stuff to make it happen. Researchers have experimented with stem cell transplants in mice and pigs, growing actual tooth-like structures in their jaws. Japan even has a famous case where scientists grew a functional tooth in a mouse's mouth using bioengineered cells. But here's the catch. In humans, the process is way slower and riskier. You're talking years for one tooth to fully develop, and no guarantee it'll match your natural bite. Oh, and here's a weird little side fact. Your teeth are technically alive. The hard enamel you see on the outside isn't living tissue, but the inside, the dentin and pulp, are. That's why you feel pain when a cavity reaches deep enough. So growing a tooth isn't just making a rock out of calcium. It's building an entire organ with blood vessels and nerves perfectly integrated into your jawbone. The closest thing we have right now are dental implants, titanium screws that fuse with your jawbone, topped with a crown that looks like a real tooth. And yeah, they work great, but they're not the same as regrowing the real thing. They don't heal themselves, they don't shift naturally with your bite, and they can wear out over time. So why haven't we cracked this yet? It's partly because tooth regeneration research doesn't get the same funding as, say, cancer or heart disease. Missing teeth aren't life-threatening. They're just a quality-of-life issue. Plus, our current fixes, like implants and dentures, already make billions for the dental industry. Not exactly a huge incentive to replace that with a one-time, permanent solution. But here's the twist. Some labs are getting close. There's a Japanese pharmaceutical company working on a drug that can stimulate tooth buds to form again. They've tested it on ferrets and dogs, and in some cases, it's worked. Human trials are planned for the next few years. Imagine, instead of booking a dentist for an implant, you could take a pill, wait a few months, and start sprouting a brand new tooth. Like magic. Until that day comes, though, we're stuck with what we've got. 2 sets. Use them wisely. Brush, floss, and for the love of your molars, don't open beer bottles with your teeth, because once they're gone, they're gone. At least for now.
Fully stopping motion sickness. Okay, quick question. Are you one of those lucky people who can read a whole book in the back seat of a car? Or are you the type who gets woozy just looking at a moving phone screen while the driver turns a corner? Because for a huge chunk of the population, motion sickness is the reason road trips, boot rides, and VR headsets feel more like a punishment than fun. And sure, we've got motion sickness pills. Dramamine, scopolamine patches, ginger candies, the works.
But here's the thing. None of them actually cure motion sickness. They just numb the symptoms for a while. And for some people, they don't even do that. You still end up pale, sweaty, and praying for the ride to be over. So why can't we stop it completely? Well, motion sickness is basically your brain having a meltdown over mixed messages. Your eyes are telling you one thing, your inner ear, the part with the balance sensors, is telling you something else, and your brain can't reconcile the two. Imagine watching a movie where the audio is half a second out of sync. Now imagine that, but instead of annoyance, your body responds by thinking, I might be poisoned, better throw up. Yes, that's the actual evolutionary theory. Back in ancient times, conflicting sensory signals might have meant you ate something toxic, so your body tries to purge it. That's why reading in a moving car messes you up. Your eyes think you're stationary because you're staring at a book, but your inner ear is like, we're moving, we're turning, why are you ignoring me? Boom, nausea. The opposite happens in some VR games. Your eyes think you're running through a forest, but your inner ear is like, buddy, we're sitting perfectly still. Same confusion, same result. Now, you'd think scientists could just turn off this miscommunication, right? Well, they've tried. There are headsets that flash strobe lights in your peripheral vision to mimic movement, wristbands that send mild electrical pulses to distract your brain, and even special glasses with liquid-filled rings that slosh in sync with your motion. Some people swear by them, others say they do nothing. Pills like Dramamine work by sedating the part of your brain that processes balance signals, but that comes with side effects like drowsiness and dry mouth. The scopolamine patch, the little sticker you put behind your ear, blocks certain nerve signals altogether. Works for some, makes others feel even weirder. The problem is, motion sickness isn't a single on-off switch in the brain. It's this messy network of sensory pathways that overlap with other systems like vision and even digestion. If you shut one part down, the rest might still trigger the response. And here's a weird fact. Some astronauts get it too. You'd think NASA's elite space travelers are immune, but nope, it's so common there's an official term for it. Space adaptation syndrome. In zero gravity, your inner ear basically throws up its hands and says, I have no idea which way is up. Astronauts spend days feeling dizzy, nauseous, and disoriented until their brains adapt. That's also why fixing motion sickness matters for the future. If we can't fully prevent it, long space missions are going to be miserable. Some researchers think the solution might be training your brain out of it, kind of like exposure therapy. They've run studies where people do small, repeated doses of VR that make them slightly nauseous, and over time, their symptoms lessen. But the catch is, not everyone adapts, and some people just get stuck in that I feel gross loop forever. The real holy grail would be a way to instantly sync up your visual and vestibular systems so they always agree. That might mean micro-stimulating the balance organs in your inner ear, basically fooling them into matching what your eyes see. But right now, the tech is bulky, expensive, and mostly in lab stages. So for now, motion sickness is one of those we manage it, but we don't conquer it problems. If you're one of the unlucky ones, you either drug yourself, avoid certain activities, or keep a plastic bag handy just in case. And that's kind of wild when you think about it. We can keep a heart beating with machines, but we can't stop your brain from panicking because you're reading in a moving car. Until science catches up, I guess, it's ginger chews, fresh air, and the eternal hope that the driver stops taking corners like they're in a racing game.
Curing common food allergies. Picture this. You're at a birthday party. There's cake, there's ice cream, everyone's having a good time. And you have to stand there asking, does this have peanuts? Or, is there any dairy in this? Or, did someone use soy oil? Because for millions of people, one wrong bite isn't just a bad day, it's an ambulance ride. Food allergies are weird. Your immune system is supposed to protect you from real threats like viruses and bacteria. But if you have an allergy, it decides to treat something totally harmless, like milk, eggs, or shrimp, as if it's a deadly invader.
The moment you eat it, your body launches an all-out attack. That can mean itching, swelling, hives, or in severe cases, anaphylaxis, where your throat closes up and your blood pressure drops. That's the grab the EpiPen and call 911 kind of situation. And here's the frustrating part. We don't have a cure. We can treat reactions, yes, antihistamines for mild cases, adrenaline injections for emergencies, but actually removing the allergen from your system, still not there. The current solution is basically just avoiding the food for life, which is like telling someone with vision problems, just don't look at anything far away. You might think, but science can transplant organs. Why can't it just reset the immune system? The problem is, allergies aren't caused by a single simple defect. They're this tangled mess of immune cells, antibodies, and genetic predisposition. Once your immune system learns to freak out over a certain protein, it's like a bad habit it can't unlearn. Now, there are some experimental treatments that sound promising. One is called oral immunotherapy. Basically, you eat teeny tiny amounts of the allergen every day, slowly increasing the dose until your immune system gets bored and stops overreacting. Kind of like tricking a guard dog by giving it small treats until it stops barking. For some people, this works well enough that accidental exposure won't trigger a serious reaction anymore. But it's risky. If you push the dose too fast, you can trigger the very reaction you're trying to prevent. There's also research into epicutaneous immunotherapy, which uses skin patches that release microscopic amounts of the allergen. Same idea, different delivery method. And for peanut allergies in particular, a few treatments have actually been approved in certain countries, but they're not cures. They're more like insurance policies. They raise your tolerance so a crumb won't send you to the ER, but you still can't just sit down and eat a peanut butter sandwich. Here's a strange fact. Some kids do grow out of their allergies naturally. Milk and egg allergies, for example, often disappear by adulthood. But peanut and shellfish allergies? Those tend to stick around for life. No one's totally sure why, but it might be because those proteins are harder for the immune system to forget. The really wild stuff is happening in labs right now. Scientists are experimenting with modifying the immune system directly, shutting off the specific antibody, IgE, that overreacts to allergens. There's even research into using CRISPR gene editing to reprogram immune cells so they stop seeing peanuts or shellfish or milk as enemies. Sounds amazing, right? Problem is, the immune system is delicate. If you mess with it too much, you risk leaving the person vulnerable to real threats. And let's not ignore the other obstacle, money. Allergy treatments are a huge industry. EpiPens alone make hundreds of millions of dollars a year. A true cure would be a one-time fix, and that doesn't bring in the same steady profit as lifelong management. That's not the only reason progress is slow, but it's hard to pretend it's not part of the equation. So, for now, if you've got a food allergy, the advice is still the same as it's been for decades. Read every label, ask every waiter, carry your emergency meds, and hope that one day, instead of dodging certain foods forever, you can just eat like everyone else without risking your life.
Spam-free email. Let's be honest. How many times have you opened your email today only to be greeted by some combination of "Congratulations, you won a free iPhone," or "Limited time offer, buy now or regret forever," or "Your account has been compromised"? And that's just the stuff that makes it past the spam folder. For most of us, the inbox is basically a battleground, legitimate messages buried under a mountain of nonsense we didn't ask for. You might think, well, spam filters exist, problem solved, right? Not quite. Spam filters are good, don't get me wrong. They catch the obvious junk, like emails from known scammers or messages with suspicious attachments.
But spammers are like the ultimate opponents in a video game. Every time filters evolve, spammers evolve faster. It's like playing whack-a-mole that never ends. Here's why it's so tricky. Spam emails aren't just a nuisance, they're a numbers game. Even if 1 in 1,000 people actually clicks the link or buys the fake product, the spammer makes money. That tiny success rate is enough to keep them sending millions of emails a day. And because the cost of sending emails is basically zero, the incentive to keep spamming is enormous. Meanwhile, tech companies have to balance filtering aggressively with making sure legitimate messages don't end up in the spam folder. One false positive, and suddenly your boss's email about the meeting gets buried forever. Spammers have gotten clever. They tweak subject lines to avoid detection, use words that sound normal, or even forge addresses to look like your friends. Some use images instead of text because filters are used to scan only the text content. Others hide links behind tiny buttons or encoded code that tricks the filter but still works when you click. It's basically a constant cat-and-mouse game. Every time a filter blocks a new trick, spammers invent 5 more. And it's not just a tech problem, it's human psychology too. Phishing emails, for example, try to trick you personally, like pretending your bank account is at risk or that you owe money to the IRS. Even the savviest people occasionally click because the email is designed to create urgency or fear. That's why spam can't be solved with algorithms alone. You also need constant education, which is basically impossible on a global scale. Here's a fun fact. In the early 2000s, spam made up over 90% of all email traffic. Today, it's lower, around 45% globally, but that still means nearly half of all emails flying around the internet are junk. And new spammers are constantly entering the game, especially in countries where enforcement is weak. Email is universal, cheap, and almost impossible to regulate completely. Companies have tried clever solutions. Gmail, for example, uses AI to learn from millions of users marking emails as spam, and it gets better over time. But AI isn't perfect. Clever spammers sometimes make it look normal to fool the system. Some services try to block emails from certain countries or block new domains automatically, but that also risks catching legitimate messages. And don't forget the newest twist. Spammers aren't just sending classic junk anymore. Some are sneaky attempts at hacking, tricking people into downloading malware or stealing credentials. Others are advertising scams for fake cryptocurrency schemes or miracle products. It's evolved far beyond the annoying "you've won a contest" emails. So why haven't we solved spam completely? Basically because it's a game of infinite innovation. Every solution creates a new problem, and every restriction creates a workaround. It's like trying to plug a leaky dam while someone keeps digging new holes upstream. The combination of human error, clever manipulation, and the sheer volume of messages makes spam a permanent companion to email. For now, the best we can do is rely on filters, stay vigilant, never click suspicious links, and hope that email providers continue improving their AI. But let's face it, no matter what happens, spam isn't going anywhere. It's just going to keep evolving, and we're going to keep trying to keep up. Your inbox will never be perfectly clean, but at least with modern filters, it's a little less like a battlefield.
Fully secure password systems that are easy to use. Think about how many passwords you have right now. Go ahead, try to count. Don't cheat. Gmail, social media, online shopping, your work account, streaming services, banking apps. The list goes on forever. If you're like most people, it's overwhelming. And here's the kicker. Most of us know we're terrible at managing them. Now, ideally, we'd have a password system that's both completely secure and ridiculously easy to use. Like you could remember all your passwords in your head and hackers would never get in. Sounds simple, right? But that's where the problem lies. Convenience and safety are basically arch enemies in the world of passwords. The more secure you try to make them, the harder they are to remember. The easier they are to remember, the less secure they usually are. Let's break it down. Simple passwords like 123456 or password are easy to remember, but any hacker with a basic program can crack them in seconds. Stronger passwords, a mix of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, symbols, and at least 12 characters are way harder to hack. But remembering those, forget it. You either write them down, not exactly safe, or reuse the same one everywhere, also not safe. So even though we've all heard, don't reuse passwords, most of us do it anyway. And then there's password managers. These apps can generate insane, completely random passwords and remember them for you. On paper, that sounds perfect, security and convenience. But here's the catch. Now your password security is only as strong as that one master password. Forget it or get hacked, and all your accounts are suddenly at risk. Plus, some people are just uncomfortable trusting a third-party app with all their digital keys. Two-factor authentication, or 2FA, is another attempt at solving the problem. It adds a second layer, usually a text message code or an authenticator app. This drastically improves security, but also adds friction. Have you ever tried logging into an account late at night with a weak cell phone signal? You might have stared at your phone for 10 minutes wondering why it won't send the code. That's the exact convenience versus security trade-off in action. Even tech companies haven't fully solved it. Some try using biometric systems, fingerprints, facial recognition, or retina scans. That's secure and convenient in some ways, but not foolproof. Your fingerprint can be lifted. Facial recognition can be tricked with a photo or mask, and sometimes the sensors just don't work. Plus, biometrics are permanent. If someone somehow steals your fingerprint data, you can't exactly change it like a password. There are also experimental password systems that use patterns, gestures, or even brainwave signals. Sounds futuristic, right? The problem is nothing so far has cracked that sweet spot where it's both completely secure and insanely easy for everyday users. Any system that's easy for humans to remember tends to be easier for attackers to guess. Any system that's super hard for attackers to break tends to be hard for humans to use. Here's a fun side fact. In some surveys, people admitted to writing their passwords on sticky notes taped to their monitors. And why not? If remembering a password is literally impossible, your brain finds the easiest workaround. Hackers love this. The irony is that the very tools designed to keep us safe often push us towards unsafe behaviors just to survive day-to-day digital life. So why haven't we solved it yet? It's not for lack of trying. Security experts, cryptographers, and tech companies have been innovating for decades. The problem is human nature. We want convenience, we forget things, we reuse passwords, and we hate friction. Until someone invents a system that's hack-proof and so effortless you forget it's even there, we're stuck in this compromise. Slightly safer passwords that are annoying to use, or super convenient ones that are vulnerable. For now, the best we can do is use a combination of password managers, two-factor authentication, and occasionally changing passwords, basically juggling multiple imperfect solutions at once. It's messy, but that's the reality of digital life. Dream of a fully secure,
perfectly convenient password system? Still out of reach. And until someone cracks that, we're all just trying to survive the online chaos one login at a time.
Fast, affordable, rural internet. Picture this. You're in a city, streaming your favorite show in 4K, video calling friends without a single lag, and ordering groceries online with a tap. Now, imagine living just a few hours away in a rural area where the internet barely loads, your Zoom call freezes every 5 minutes, and streaming anything above standard definition is basically a joke. Frustrating, right? Yet this is reality for millions of people around the world. You might think fast internet is everywhere by now. After all, we've got satellites, fiber optic cables, 5G, and all the latest tech. And yes, urban areas are often spoiled with top-tier connectivity. But rural areas? They're still left in the digital dust. It's a problem that seems so fixable. Just lay down cables or launch more satellites and boom, problem solved. But it's not that simple. First off, the cost. Installing fiber in a city is relatively cheap because houses and businesses are close together. A single mile of cable can serve hundreds of users. In rural areas, homes are spread miles apart. That same mile of cable might only reach 5 or 10 households. The infrastructure cost per person skyrockets, and for internet providers, it's often not profitable. That's why governments sometimes have to step in with subsidies, but those are limited and take time to roll out. Then there's geography. Mountains, forests, deserts, or swamps make running cables or even setting up towers difficult. Some areas are so remote that laying fiber isn't just expensive, it's physically dangerous. Drones and satellite internet can help, but satellites bring their own challenges. Latency, bandwidth limits, and subscription costs that aren't affordable for everyone. And don't forget politics and regulations. Spectrum allocation for wireless internet, permits for building infrastructure, and even monopolies or lack of competition in certain countries can slow progress. Even if technology exists, bureaucracy and business decisions often leave rural residents waiting. Interestingly, some countries have tried creative solutions. In parts of Africa and Asia, companies use balloons, drones, or low-orbit satellites to beam internet to remote villages. In the U.S., rural communities have cooperatives that build and maintain their own networks. And in Australia, there's a satellite network specifically aimed at reaching outback towns. These solutions work to an extent, but they're often patchy, expensive, or limited in speed compared to urban broadband. Here's a striking fact. In 2022, over 2.7 billion people worldwide still had no access to the internet at all, and a large percentage of those people live in rural areas. Think about it. In 2025, a third of humanity is still digitally isolated, missing out on education, telehealth, online jobs, and even basic communication that the rest of us take for granted. Another challenge is affordability. Even when the internet is available in rural areas, monthly costs can be exorbitant relative to local incomes. People often have to choose between internet access and essential needs like food, transportation, or healthcare. So it's not just about speed, it's about making it genuinely accessible for everyone. And the weirdest part, technology exists that could technically solve most of these problems. Starlink and other satellite providers can beam high-speed internet almost anywhere. Fiber optics can carry enormous amounts of data. 5G and future wireless tech can reach rural communities, but implementation is slow, costly, and uneven. It's a case of having all the tools, but still struggling to make them work universally. So why hasn't it been fixed yet? Essentially, it's a mix of economics, geography, politics, and human behavior.
Rural internet isn't glamorous or profitable for many companies. The terrain is challenging, and governments can only do so much. The result? Millions of people still rely on slow, unstable, or overpriced connections, while cities zoom ahead. Until someone figures out how to combine affordability, speed, and universal access, the rural internet gap will remain one of the simplest sounding problems that's surprisingly hard to solve. Meanwhile, those of us in connected areas just keep streaming, scrolling, and video calling, blissfully unaware of the digital isolation happening just a few miles away.
Phones that don't lose battery health. Let's be honest, everyone loves a brand new phone. The screen is crisp, the apps load instantly, and the battery feels like it could last forever. Fast forward a year or two, though, and that forever battery starts acting not so forever. Suddenly, your phone dies halfway through the day, charging takes longer, and you start eyeing battery replacements like a desperate survivalist. It's frustrating, and you might wonder, why haven't we fixed this yet? Why can't phones just have batteries that stay healthy forever? Here's the thing. The technology behind your phone's battery is a marvel of modern science, but it's also fundamentally limited. Most smartphones use lithium-ion batteries, which are incredibly energy-dense, lightweight, and rechargeable. They power everything from iPhones to laptops to electric cars. But lithium-ion has one annoying property. It naturally degrades over time. Every charge cycle, a full charge from 0% to 100%, slowly eats away at the battery's ability to hold energy. Even if you baby your phone, avoid heat, and never let it hit 0%, decay is inevitable. Why does this happen? Inside the battery, lithium ions move back and forth between two electrodes during charging and discharging. Over time, this repeated movement causes tiny chemical changes and physical wear inside the battery. The electrodes get coated with layers of gunk, the electrolyte slowly breaks down, and eventually the battery just can't store as much charge. It's like constantly stretching a rubber band. Eventually, it loses elasticity. And no matter how smart your charging habits are, physics is still physics. Phone manufacturers have tried to mitigate this problem in clever ways. Many modern phones limit charging to 80 or 90% when they detect overnight charging to reduce stress. Some phones learn your daily usage patterns and optimize charging speed accordingly. There are even new battery chemistries in development, like lithium polymer and solid-state batteries, which promise slower degradation and higher energy density. But none of them are perfect yet. And even solid-state batteries, which sound like science fiction, will eventually lose some capacity. They're just slower to degrade. Battery replacement is the current workaround, but it comes with headaches. Not every phone is easy to open, not every replacement battery is safe, and replacement costs can be surprisingly high, especially if you factor in labor at a repair shop. Some people end up buying a whole new phone instead, which is great for the tech industry, not so great for your wallet or the planet. Here's a fun little fact. Battery health doesn't just decline with use, it also declines with age. Even a phone sitting in a drawer for 2 years will have a slightly worse battery than when it was first manufactured. So technically, even if you never touch your phone, the battery is slowly losing capacity. Weird, right? And it's not just phones. Every device using lithium-ion faces the same problem. Laptops, electric cars, smartwatches, they all degrade. That's why Tesla and other EV companies invest heavily in battery research. They want to make cells that last thousands of cycles without losing too much capacity. The tech exists, but scaling it down safely, cheaply, and reliably for smartphones is a different challenge. So why haven't we solved the battery problem?
Because we're fighting chemistry. We've optimized lithium-ion as much as possible within the size, weight, and cost constraints of phones. Any radical improvement would require a completely new battery design, which takes years of research, testing, and mass production to get right. And even then, nothing lasts forever. For now, the best advice is practical. Don't overheat your phone, avoid full discharges whenever possible, charge slowly when you can, and accept that your battery will eventually weaken. It's frustrating, sure, but at least it's predictable. The dream of a phone that stays at 100% health forever? That's still one of those simple problems that turns out to be deceptively hard because physics is undefeated and your phone's battery is proof.
Unhackable computers. We all want our devices to feel safe. You want to log into your laptop, check your bank account, send some emails, and not have to worry that some stranger halfway across the world is quietly poking around your files. It seems like a basic, solvable thing, right? Just make the computer unhackable. Build a digital fortress with no doors, no windows, and no secret tunnels. Problem solved. Except here's the problem. There's no such thing as truly unhackable. Every security measure, no matter how advanced, has a weakness. And hackers, whether they're lone wolf cybercriminals, organized groups, or even governments, are really good at finding those weaknesses. The first issue is that computers are complicated, really complicated. Your average laptop or phone isn't just one program running. It's millions of lines of code written by different people over different years, often on top of older systems. Every single one of those lines of code is a potential place where a mistake could hide. Hackers don't need to break everything. They just need one crack in the wall, one bug in the code, one misconfigured setting, and they're in. Even if you somehow had perfect, flawless software, which no one does, you've still got hardware vulnerabilities. Remember the Spectre and Meltdown flaws a few years back? Those weren't caused by bad programming. They were baked into the actual design of computer chips. And because those chips were already in millions of devices, the fix was tricky, and the problem lasted years. And then there's the wild card, humans. You can have the most sophisticated encryption in the world, but if someone can trick you into clicking a shady link, downloading a fake urgent update, or handing over your password on a phishing site, the whole system crumbles. This is why a huge chunk of hacking isn't about breaking the machine. It's about manipulating the person. It's called social engineering, and it works far too often. Security experts are constantly building stronger defenses, better encryption, smarter firewalls, advanced intrusion detection systems. But as soon as they close one hole, attackers start looking for another. It's an endless arms race. For every new lock, someone's working on a new key, and sometimes that someone is funded with millions of dollars and operating in total secrecy. There are air-gapped computers, systems completely disconnected from the internet, which are close to unhackable. But even those can be breached in weird ways. Hackers have found methods involving electromagnetic emissions, sound waves, even manipulating cooling fans to send out tiny data signals. It sounds like movie stuff, but it's very real. So why don't we just build the perfect unhackable system? Because perfect in security doesn't exist. You can make a system harder to hack. You can make hacking it so expensive and time-consuming that it's not worth the effort, but absolute zero-risk security, that's fantasy.
Computers are tools made by humans, and humans make mistakes, and mistakes eventually get found. So the reality is, we'll probably never have an unhackable computer. What we can have are better habits, stronger safeguards, and faster responses when something goes wrong. Think of it like your house. You can lock the doors, install alarms, get a guard dog, but you can't guarantee no one will ever try to break in. The goal is to make your house the hardest one to rob on the street.
Plastic waste that biodegrades quickly. Plastic, it's everywhere. Your water bottle, your grocery bag, your phone case, your packaging, it's basically taken over the planet. And the big problem? It doesn't go away. Ever. Well, not on a human timescale anyway. Some plastics sit in landfills, oceans, and rivers for hundreds of years, breaking into tiny pieces, but never truly disappearing. That's why the idea of plastic that biodegrades quickly sounds like the perfect solution, right? Just toss it, and poof, gone in months instead of centuries. But here's the catch. Making plastics that biodegrade fast is way harder than it sounds. Most of the bioplastics you hear about, the ones marketed as compostable, have some serious limitations. For starters, many of them only break down under very specific conditions. That could mean in industrial composting plants at high temperatures or in soil with the right microbes. If that plastic ends up in the ocean, in your backyard, or in a regular landfill, it might last just as long as regular plastic. Even when bioplastics do break down, the process isn't always clean. Some release methane or microplastics before fully decomposing. So instead of solving the problem, we might just be creating a new, slightly different problem. And unlike natural materials like leaves or paper, plastics are made of long-chain polymers that are intentionally tough. Tough polymers are great for packaging and durability, but terrible if you want them to disappear quickly. Scientists are experimenting with ways to make plastic truly biodegradable. There are enzymes that can chew up certain plastics, bacteria that can metabolize plastic polymers, and even genetically engineered fungi designed to break down PET, the stuff in soda bottles. Some of these lab results are promising. A few plastics that used to take centuries to decompose can now be broken down in months under the right conditions. But scaling this up to meet global demand, that's a whole other challenge. And here's the ironic part. Fast degrading plastics often cost more to produce and are less durable than traditional plastics. That's a tough sell for companies that rely on cheap, long-lasting packaging. Durability and biodegradability are basically at odds. The stronger you make the plastic, the harder it is to break down. Manufacturers are stuck balancing performance, cost, and environmental impact. Even if the technology existed to make perfect, quick-degrading plastics, there's still the behavioral side. People might feel less guilty about tossing these plastics and recycling them or dispose of them carelessly, thinking the material will vanish shortly after use. That could create more litter in the short term before the biodegradation kicks in. It's a classic moral hazard problem. Make something too convenient and humans take advantage. So why haven't we solved it yet? Partly because plastics are chemically stubborn, partly because scaling new materials globally is expensive, and partly because humans still generate more waste than the planet can handle. Fast-degrading plastics aren't impossible, but the drop-in solution that works everywhere, in every climate, and for every use case, still out of reach. For now, the most realistic approach is a mix.
Reduce single-use plastics, improve recycling, and invest in new biodegradable materials while understanding their limits. The dream of a world where plastic vanishes shortly after use is still alive, but for now, it remains one of those deceptively simple problems humanity just can't fully fix.
Flood prevention in cities without massive costs. Floods, they're messy, scary, and unfortunately, more common than we'd like. You've probably seen streets turn into rivers after heavy rain, cars floating down roads, or basements filling up like indoor swimming pools. Now, imagine trying to prevent all of that without spending billions of dollars every year. Sounds simple in theory, right? Just build dikes, drains, and pumps, and the problem is solved. But in reality, not so much. Cities are complicated. Streets, sidewalks, subways, sewers, and buildings all interact in ways that make water management a nightmare. When it rains heavily, water can't just go somewhere. There's only so much drainage capacity. Engineers design stormwater systems to handle average conditions, but extreme weather is, well, extreme. A rainstorm that's once in a century might overwhelm even the newest infrastructure. And with climate change, those once-in-a-century events are happening more often. One approach is massive civil engineering projects, levees, giant underground tunnels, pumping stations. Tokyo, for example, has enormous underground flood tunnels capable of diverting millions of gallons of water during storms. These systems are engineering marvels, but they cost billions to build and maintain, money that most cities simply don't have. And even if they do, no system is foolproof. Extreme rainfall, unexpected blockages, or simultaneous failures can still cause flooding. There are cheaper strategies, but they come with trade-offs. Green infrastructure, parks, permeable pavements, rooftop gardens can absorb rainwater and reduce runoff. Streets can be designed to channel water into temporary holding areas. But these measures are slower, less dramatic, and they can only handle so much water at a time. They're also dependent on space, and in crowded cities, land is precious. You can't just turn a parking lot into a rain-absorbing field without disrupting daily life. And don't forget human behavior. People often build in flood-prone areas, paving over natural wetlands and drainage zones. Urban planning mistakes compound the problem. The more concrete you have, the faster water runs off and the higher the risk of flash floods. Even the best engineering can't fully counter decisions made decades ago. Technology helps, predictive flood models, smart drainage systems, and real-time monitoring can warn cities when water levels rise, but warnings don't stop the water from flowing, and not everyone responds in time. A flood-proof city in concept can still be soaked in reality. Here's a striking fact. In 2021 alone, floods affected over 30 million people in just 1 year globally, causing billions in damage. And most of these weren't in poor, underdeveloped areas. Even wealthy cities with advanced infrastructure got hit. Money helps, but it doesn't guarantee safety. Extreme weather is, by nature, unpredictable and powerful. So why haven't we solved urban flooding completely? Because water doesn't follow rules, cities are expensive to redesign, and weather patterns are getting more extreme. We can manage it better than in the past, but a flood-free city without massive costs?
That's still one of those deceptively simple problems that humans have been wrestling with for centuries. For now, cities try a combination of engineering, green infrastructure, planning, and public awareness. It's messy, imperfect, and expensive, but it's the best we've got. Until climate control is a reality or we reinvent city design from scratch, floods will remain a persistent challenge for urban life.
Earthquake-proof buildings for all budgets. Earthquakes. They're sudden, terrifying, and completely unpredictable. One moment, everything is normal. The next, the ground is shaking, walls are cracking, and lives are at risk. Naturally, we want buildings that can withstand these forces. Ideally for everyone, not just the wealthy or government buildings. Sounds straightforward, right? Just design safe structures and everyone's protected. But the reality is complicated. The strongest, safest, earthquake-resistant buildings are engineering marvels. They use flexible materials, shock-absorbing foundations, and advanced designs that allow the building to sway instead of collapsing. Skyscrapers in Japan, for example, have tuned mass dampers, huge weights that counterbalance motion during tremors. Bridges can bend and twist without breaking. It's brilliant, but all of this comes at a serious cost. Here's the core problem. Building earthquake-proof structures is expensive. High-quality steel, reinforced concrete, advanced damping systems, and rigorous inspections add thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars to the cost per square meter. For wealthy countries or companies constructing skyscrapers, that's manageable. For average homeowners or small communities, it's often completely out of reach. Cheaper alternatives exist, but they aren't foolproof. Simple retrofitting, basic reinforcements, or lightweight construction can reduce some risk, but won't withstand a major quake. And in many developing countries, construction is driven by immediate cost rather than long-term safety. Materials may be substandard, regulations lax, and enforcement weak. In these places, earthquakes remain deadly because the ideal designs simply aren't affordable. Another challenge is unpredictability. Earthquakes vary in strength, depth, and duration, and different areas have different risks. A design that works perfectly in one location might be insufficient in another. Engineers have to account for countless variables: soil type, building height, local fault lines, historical data, and even then there's no guarantee. Nature can still surprise us. Then there's the human factor. Even the best designs fail if construction is rushed, corners are cut, or maintenance is neglected. Training and supervision costs add even more to the total. And when disasters happen, the consequences for cutting corners are devastating. It's a balance between affordability and safety that many communities simply can't maintain. Here's an interesting point. In Japan and California, earthquakes have inspired some of the safest modern construction techniques in the world, but the same techniques, if applied universally, would make housing unaffordable for millions. So engineers and planners constantly juggle risk versus cost, often accepting some level of danger as unavoidable. The dream of earthquake-proof housing for all budgets remains elusive. The technology exists, the knowledge exists, and the examples are out there, but implementing them everywhere for everyone at an affordable price is still one of those deceptively simple-sounding problems that humans haven't fully solved. For now, the best strategies combine smart engineering, strict building codes, retrofitting existing structures, and educating people about earthquake safety. It's not perfect, it's expensive, and it's unevenly applied, but until costs drop dramatically or materials improve, universal earthquake-proof buildings are still a dream rather than a reality.
Forest fires, they're terrifying, destructive, and sometimes completely unavoidable. Every year we see massive blazes consuming acres of trees, wildlife fleeing for survival, and communities on high alert. Naturally, we want to prevent them. But here's the catch. Preventing fires without harming the ecosystem is far from simple. One common approach is controlled burns. Firefighters intentionally set small, manageable fires to burn off dry brush that could fuel a massive blaze. Sounds smart, right? Reduce the fuel, reduce the danger. But here's the problem. Controlled burns are tricky. Timing, weather, and location all matter. A sudden gust of wind can turn a safe burn into a dangerous firestorm. Plus, you can't just light fires anywhere. Ecosystems are delicate, and fire can harm plants, soil, and even wildlife if done incorrectly. Then there's mechanical clearing, chopping down underbrush, thinning forests, or removing dead trees. This works in some areas, but it's expensive, labor-intensive, and can itself disrupt habitats. Animals lose shelter, soil erosion increases, and plant diversity can decline. Even well-intentioned interventions can have long-term ecological consequences. Let's talk about urban wildland interfaces, places where towns and forests meet. This is where prevention becomes even harder. People build homes near forests, adding ignition sources like campfires, power lines, and cigarettes. Clearing brush around houses helps, but it can only go so far. You can't realistically turn miles of surrounding forest into a concrete barrier without destroying the natural environment entirely. Climate change makes the challenge worse. Hotter, drier conditions turn forests into tinder boxes. Lightning strikes, normally harmless, can ignite massive fires. Even with perfect prevention strategies, extreme weather can overwhelm human efforts. The balance between protecting communities and preserving nature is delicate and often impossible to perfect. Here's a surprising fact. Some ecosystems actually depend on periodic fires. Certain pine trees need fire to release seeds, and some plant species thrive after a burn. Preventing all fires could unintentionally harm these natural cycles. So fire prevention isn't just about stopping flames. It's about deciding which fires should burn and which ones need to be stopped. That's not an easy decision to make. Technology helps. Satellites, drones, and AI can monitor forests in real time, predicting areas at risk and detecting small fires before they spread. But detection alone doesn't stop fires. You still need interventions, and interventions are costly, dangerous, and imperfect. Sometimes, despite all the planning, nature just wins. So why haven't we solved forest fire prevention completely? Because it's a juggling act. You have to reduce fuel loads, manage human activity, adapt to changing climates, and preserve natural ecosystems all at the same time. Controlled burns, mechanical clearing, and monitoring help, but there's no single solution that eliminates risk entirely. Until we can engineer forests that are both fire-resistant and ecologically healthy without massive costs or unintended consequences, preventing destructive fires will remain one of those deceptively simple-sounding problems humanity can't fully solve. For now, it's about smart management, careful planning, and accepting that sometimes fire is part of nature's cycle.
Predicting the weather perfectly weeks ahead. We all check the weather, right? Maybe you're planning a picnic, a weekend trip, or just deciding whether to bring an umbrella. And while a forecast a day or two ahead is usually pretty accurate, try looking 2 or 3 weeks into the future, and suddenly it's a total guessing game. So why can't we just predict the weather perfectly weeks ahead? You'd think, with all our satellites, supercomputers, and advanced models, it should be possible. The truth is, weather is inherently chaotic.
Meteorologists often talk about chaos theory, the idea that tiny differences in initial conditions can lead to wildly different outcomes. Think of it like this. A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and a few weeks later, it contributes to a storm in Texas. Sounds a bit dramatic, but it's actually the essence of why long-term weather prediction is so difficult. The atmosphere is a complex, dynamic system, and even the slightest measurement error can throw off predictions over days and weeks. Supercomputers run enormous simulations, taking into account temperature, pressure, wind patterns, ocean currents, humidity, and countless other variables. These models are extremely powerful and constantly improving, but they're not perfect. The more you try to extend the forecast further into the future, the less reliable it becomes. A 24-hour forecast might be 90% accurate. A 7-day forecast may be 70%, and a 3-week forecast, often more like a coin toss. There are some workarounds, like climate models that predict general trends. For example, it will likely be warmer than average this month, or rainfall will be above normal. These models can help with agriculture, energy planning, and disaster preparedness, but they don't tell you whether it will rain on your wedding day or snow on your birthday. Fine-grained, day-by-day accuracy weeks in advance is just not possible right now. And the challenge grows with extreme events. Hurricanes, tornadoes, or sudden cold snaps are especially sensitive to small changes in the atmosphere. A tiny misreading in wind speed or sea temperature today can completely change where a storm goes in 2 weeks. That's why early predictions are often vague and constantly updated as the event gets closer. Even data collection isn't perfect. Satellites, weather stations, ocean buoys, they're all incredible tools, but coverage isn't uniform. Some regions of the world, especially remote oceans or developing countries, don't have enough sensors to feed complete information into the models. Missing data means less accuracy, and even minor gaps can ripple through forecasts. So why hasn't humanity solved long-term weather prediction? Essentially, it's not a technology problem, it's a natural problem. The atmosphere is chaotic, sensitive, and incredibly complex. Even with infinite computing power, perfect measurements, and flawless models, predicting the weather weeks in advance with absolute certainty might always be impossible. For now, we make the best of it. Short-term forecasts are highly accurate. Long-term predictions provide trends, and meteorologists constantly refine models as new data comes in. The dream of knowing exactly if it will rain 3 weeks from now remains one of those simple problems that turns out to be deceptively, impossibly complicated.